Thank you for everyone for turning up. It's going to be an interesting conversation. We want to really look at what's going, we've gone through the pandemic process and we're still going through the ramifications of the disruptions and sort of get some feeling for what the future is looking like and what companies are looking at to do going into the future. So I came across this term in a lecture a while ago called VUCA, that we're living in this VUCA world now, which is, we've got volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think it really does sum up a lot of the challenges that we're currently facing. We have physical and social challenges with port closures. I mean, we've got lots of labour issues at the moment. We've got labour union issues at the moment around the world. We've, particularly in the US and the UK, we've seen massive issues, and we've got issues coming up in Australia. Obviously, geopolitical challenges with the Russia, Ukraine and Taiwan, China issues, which are going to impact us for some period of time. Digital challenges with cyber attacks. I think we're all aware of the issues that, for instance, Toll have had over the last few years with their cyber attacks. Environmental challenges, the climate change and extreme weather. I think, Glenn, if I'm wrong, it was 49 degrees in Sacramento or 47 degrees in Sacramento last week, and the UK is in the middle of a drought, and we've had more rain in Sydney in 9 months than we've had ever before. And again, we're also in a period of economic challenges. I mean, most of us are not old enough to have dealt with inflation. I'm probably the only one that is, and the issues with that. And right now, the exchange rate volatility, and the Australian US dollar is insanely strong, and we're having continued issues with it. So I thought I'd give you a quick sort of background on what we as Ligentia did during the COVID period, just sort of gives you that background. So very early in the process, we were approached by one of our big customers that won some contract work for the federal government primarily, to source PPE. They'd never sourced PPE internationally before, so we set up some relationships with a procurement company in Asia to help them do that, and then we did all the PO management, and then managed the whole process through to deliver into the national stockpile. At that time, I was actually working with Alex in the New South Wales Health on the PPE response, so quite au fait with the challenges that were faced. But I think one of the key things that we learned as Ligentia, and certainly we did in New South Wales Health, was the value of purchase order management and visibility of what was going on. I think they were critical. To me, one of the things that for me going forward, I think what we need to focus on in the post-pandemic world is things around PO management. So we're particularly seeing the application of a retail type PO management process going much more broadly across silos. So traditionally, your major retailers would issue purchase orders through freight forwarders or their partners. They would be managed, confirm receipt of purchase order, movement of the purchase order, shipping windows, etc. Traditionally, a lot of other industries never did that, but we're seeing now that there's a lot of companies that are seeing real value in that space in dealing with what I would call PO, almost micro PO management. And this is something that sort of I saw in my time, again, working in this case with Glenn, where not all purchase orders are created equal. So we're seeing that prioritization of purchase orders and then making sure that they get on ships, etc. Where is my shipment? I mean, really, historically, we've actually traced paperwork, not actual physical shipments. And we're seeing a lot of issues now with blank sailings, meaning that containers are sitting in ports and transshipment ports in, all over the place, and people don't have the ability to do that forward planning they need because of they don't really know where their shipment is. I think the other thing too that I've become sort of aware over the last few years is the value of information. What is really going on the ground? What is the COVID situation? Which ports are at risk, etc. Where are rates going? At the moment we're seeing, spot rates are significantly below contract rates. How long is that going to last for? Equipment issues is becoming a massive issue because of the constant seesawing of vessels. You may remember that 3 or 4 months ago, there was over 100 ships off the port of Los Angeles. You know, we've had congestion in Europe. We've got congestion in Australia. I was actually reading something last week that, you know, waiting time for ships in Vancouver is up to 46 days. So, you know, this causes massive issues with equipment. And we're seeing already equipment issues. In Australia, it's returning equipment. It's very difficult to return equipment. Already in the US for exports, it's difficult finding export containers. I think blank sailings is going to become a really, really big issue over the next 6 to 12 months as shipping lines want to get those rates back up. I don't think they'll get back to the rates they were, but they certainly want them significantly above where they are now. So they'll create demand. And I think the other thing that's, to me, is very clear is that the quality of the reporting has to change. The old Excel spreadsheet with, you know, lots of boxes and, you know, taking all day to scan through it is really a thing of the past. What we really need now is what I call red box management. Just tell me the problems I've got and suggest to me what the solutions are, and then we can get on with it. So that's a real big focus on our reporting, is to get that level of detail in there so that people are not buried under a wave of data, but actually get data that's relevant to them. And again, I think we're also looking at how technology can build resistance. Now, I've always had a mantra that is, you know, every supply chain solution is people, process, systems, infrastructure. I've added innovation and data in there over the last few years, but it's becoming more and more important that the technology that you use gives you the ability to manage POs, to understand exactly where your product is, and to understand the impact of delays in the supply chain on your inventory holding. You know, we need, and that's how we get resilience. If we have information, we can come up with a solution. The best description of resilience that I saw recently is flexing but not breaking. And I think that's what we've become very good at, is that the strongest of us have been able to flex and survive. The ones that have failed have flexed and broken. And again, I think one of the things coming up too is an increased focus on sustainability. I was at a talk that Maersk gave recently where they mentioned that they're going to green methanol as a fuel, and that they will only call it ports where they have that as an option, which, for example, for Australia is a major challenge, as we have no production of scale of green methanol. So to me, again, the whole thing about the resilience is being flexible, responsive. You've got to be efficient. So your processes have to be better than they were. And again, transparency of what's going on, open communication, and also take the opportunity to look for emissions reductions. Can I do things differently to get miles out of my supply chain? You know, just quickly, in our platform, we have a platform called Ligentia, which is based around PO management, around management of origin, the vendors at origin, so PO management, making sure that ship to windows are applied to, etc. Training if necessary, you know, managing the calendars. Everything's now done as e-docs, so no physical paper. And then, you know, doing all the destination processes, including VAT and etc. Also slotting deliveries into the warehouses, because that's actually becoming a big issue here too, with return of empties. Okay, but it's all about critical path management, integration, data reporting, you know, information that suits the customer. And we have a customer hub where we provide lots of information on what's going on and analytics, etc. So that's pretty much us. As I said, I just want to make it pretty brief and get onto some of the others. So I will pass this on to Sharon.
Thank you, Peter.
Hang on, just approving it. There you go.
Great, thank you very much. Today I'll be covering achieving supply chain resilience across 4 key management areas, looking at supply chain performance management, supply chain risk management, supply chain resilience management, and looking at dynamic capabilities management. Let's now start at supply chain performance management. So an organization requires a performance mindset. We need to be aware of what are our targets for business performance and supply chain performance, and ensure that we have a balanced supply chain performance scorecard. And this scorecard needs to reflect the priorities of our customers. So we need to ask our customers, What are their priorities of our performance? What's important to them? Is it important that we are superior with cost management, or is it important that we increase our speed of our response to their requirements? So if we don't ask our customers, we just won't know. There's no point guessing what our customers require. We really need to ask them directly. Now, don't be afraid to look at industry benchmarks. There are a lot of organizations that don't like looking at benchmarks, but you really do need to understand, where does your organization fit within the competitive landscape? This will help you to inform your targets. Then you need to go ahead and measure your actual performance. You'll be able to see whether there is a gap between your actual performance and the targets you have set. This will be your competitive gap. So with your competitive gap, you need to understand, well, what's causing that gap? You'll be able to conduct a root cause analysis to identify the issues, and then establish and implement a plan that's going to allow you to close that competitive gap. You can set specific deadlines, particularly incremental deadlines, which will help you go towards your target in an incremental fashion. Continuously, you need to improve your supply chain performance management approach. Next, we're going to talk about supply chain risk management. Your organization requires a risk mindset. Business continuity is king, and this is something that during the pandemic, organizations realized how fragile they really are. And so it wasn't promised to everyone. So we need to avoid complacency. We need to be on the ball all the time, assess our organizational risk and look at our internal risks, continuously assess and monitor, and look at our external risks, our supply chain risks, know where we are, how vulnerable are we, what is our risk exposure. Then we need to measure the value that actually is at risk, because this starts to put things into perspective. When we're developing our mitigation strategies, we need to be careful about what are our short-term strategies versus long-term strategies. We may need to just develop a few short-term strategies to help us through a few rough patches. Then cost, how much are these strategies going to cost to implement? Then we need to weigh that up against the value at risk. This allows us to prioritize our mitigation investment towards protecting the significant value that's actually at risk. So we implement our mitigation strategies and then continue to monitor those strategies. Again, we need to continuously improve our supply chain risk management approach. Next, we're going to look at supply chain resilience management. We need to have a resilience mindset. We need to establish governance about how are we going to continue to manage and build resilience. We can assess our resilience to see where we're at. Now, you may want to marry your risk management approach with your resilience management approach, but just have a look at this following strategy. We need to consider the resilience strategies used by top performing firms. How have they managed living through the pandemic crisis? How did they live through the prior global financial crisis and learn from what they've actually done? We need to continue focusing on our people, process, and technology, but it's much more than that. We need to look at resilience in 3 different stages: before it occurs, whilst it is occurring, and after the resilience has ended, after the disruption event has ended. So before the disruption, we need to look at what technology are we going to use to increase our real-time visibility across our supply chain? Are we going to simulate, using technology to simulate supply chain performance, and also scenarios, planning scenarios for demand and supply? And what is our financial strength? We need to build up our financial resources. And then we have our strategies to consider. What are we going to do with inventory? How are we going to manage inventory throughout the supply chain, our sourcing methodologies, and we need to strengthen our relationships with our customers and our suppliers, and looking at our global versus local strategies for sourcing operations and when we provide our services. Then during this disruption event, this is where we actually get tested. Our resilience is tested, and we have learned during the past from this pandemic and previous global disruptions that we have learned that organizations that have the greatest agility, they're flexible, they're adaptable, and that they're able to respond as required to their customers' requirements. We are relying on our supply chain collaborations that we have with our suppliers and customers. And then comes recovery. So what can we learn? We need to learn from the lessons that we experienced during the disruption. So what can we improve and how can we further adapt? We need to be reviewing process controls. What processes do we need to tighten the controls and which do we need to loosen? Again, we need to continuously improve our supply chain risk management approach. Next is our dynamic capabilities management approach. We need to have a competitive mindset. The top performing firms in the world have difficult to replicate capabilities. And this is across 3 different areas. First, sensing. Our capabilities to sense opportunities and to shape opportunities, and also to sense threats. We are relying on technology to help us through this sensing, for example, demand sensing, monitoring performance. Then with our seizing, we need to have excellent capabilities to seize opportunities. A lot of organizations have actually stopped at this point and they are enjoying that they have achieved a competitive advantage. But over time, they start to lose that competitive advantage because they haven't taken the 3rd step, and that's transforming. We need to develop difficult to replicate transforming capabilities to transform our organizations and our supply chains. And this allows us to achieve a sustainable competitive advantage. And then again, continuously improve our dynamic capabilities management approach. And that's all from me, Peter.
You can give me back control.
Yes.
Okay, done. Okay, Alex, over to you, mate.
Thanks, Peter. I'll let you drive, mate, just to make it nice and simple.
Brilliant.
Okay, so I just thought I'd give everyone an overview of who HealthShare is. We're the largest public sector organisation in the whole of Australia. And I'll talk through these different businesses that we operate, but we wind back the clock at the height of COVID. We were not only just looking at procurement and supply chain. Our organisation was not only providing services to New South Wales Health, but the whole of New South Wales government and its citizens. So we provide food services to all the public hospitals in New South Wales, as you can see. No mean feat, we're providing 24 million meals per annum. Transport, you go, well, isn't that ambulance's responsibility to be transporting patients? We've got a business that's for non-emergency transport. So in the early days of COVID, those inbound passengers that were coming into Sydney Airport who had tested positive for COVID were being transported by our transport network over to the hotel quarantine. And if you live in New South Wales, and you may see a lot of our vehicles running around, they've got a green and white labelling and signage. We've obviously got our major distribution centre, which is that we partner up with an organisation by the name of OneLink, who are part of the EBOS group. That was our BAU medical consumables warehouse that would supply New South Wales Health pre-COVID. We also provide a cleaning and restocking services to our important partner in Ambulance New South Wales. So, a paramedic does a 12-hour shift, and prior to us setting up and designing this solution for them, they would have to come home after 12 hours and then go through and do the restocking and cleaning of ambulances. We've also got 5 major linen services distributed across New South Wales geographically that provide 51 million units of clean linen across the state. As you can see, we've got an employment workforce of 170,000 employees, which equates to 4.6 million pay slips. We've got a disability service that we provide, so those people that aren't able, we're trying to keep out of hospitals and have them being, looked after in the environment of their own home. We provide them with medical consumables and any of their equipment needs as well. And last but not least, we pay 2.6 million supplier invoices in New South Wales worth $10.5 billion, and that number, these numbers were pre-COVID, so you can just imagine what these numbers would look like in today's environment. So I thought I'd just set that scene because every single organisational business that we have is in effect a supply chain that supports New South Wales Health and New South Wales Government. Do you want to go to the next slide? You've gone too far, mate.
Yep.
So, what did we see as our key challenges? At the start, no one could provide us an accurate forecast of what we were going to need. So the way New South Wales approached it was, we're going to, need to increase our ICU beds to around 2,000. But not only were we going to have to look at what the capacity was around the rest of the public system, but we also needed to think about, okay, what if, the predictions were like they were in Italy and Spain in the early days, and we needed to start to look and consider putting together some field hospitals. So the way we approached, due to there was no accurate forecasting, what we did is we built what we call a bill of materials for an ICU bed, a COVID bed, and a field hospital bed, and then we started to buy and source against those numbers. Taxonomy, as much as we as procurement and supply chain practitioners may think that this is pretty straightforward language, but when you're talking to clinicians around, what is it that you've got on the shelf? How much more do you need? It's really making sure that we've got a common language that we could use to ensure that we were able to communicate on the same level in the same language. Automation. This was critical for us, just given the scale of our organisation and the breadth of locations that we had to reach. So obviously we're an Oracle application organisation, so we needed to quickly spin up databases that could actually manage information flowing through the system. And we also set up what we called a daily stock taking at the cold face, so that we could see exactly what was on in a hospital at any given time. And then we had live reporting to say, against the forecast or lack of forecast that we had, how much stock had we procured, how much stock had we had arrived, how confident we were in whatever was outstanding coming into Australia, because all these key pieces of information that I've got on this slide were really guiding government in relation to the decisions they were making through COVID. And just on that, I spoke to earlier that we had one warehouse managing our business as usual. We had to stand up another 20 warehouses that needed to home 100,000 pallets of PPE and pharmaceuticals to make sure that we could support the needs of not only government but the citizens of New South Wales. Next slide, please. So on the back of what we've seen happen in the last 2 years, it was a real eye-opener for us in relation to the investment that had gone into supply chain and procurement within New South Wales Health. So we've embarked on now improving the visibility around sourcing and contracts, our ability to flow information from catalogue to order. Our business intelligence and analytics has now moved up onto another level. Procure to pay was quite critical in those early days in COVID, because most of you would remember that if you were trying to source anything from China, it needed to be in American dollars, and there was prepayments that were required to make sure you could secure stock at that given time. Traceability is one of probably the biggest Achilles heel that we had. We knew from a central perspective how much stock was being received in, how much stock was being distributed out, but we couldn't tell what was the burn rate at every health facility in New South Wales without having people go there and do some manual stock take. So we're embarking on being able to scan a product at the time that it's moving from a hospital storeroom out to a patient. The other key initiative that we've got now is Enabler. So we're using iPhones now to allow our clinicians to not only see what's available to them, but if a product is not available to them, how they can actually order an alternative substitute. And also give them the ability to be able to track their orders, no dissimilar to how you track your orders through online shopping. So that's our story. One thing that I'll share before I conclude, it wasn't easy when we went through the first waves of the pandemic, but one thing I'm absolutely proud of is that when Omicron came around and we needed to source rats, all those lessons that we had learned through the early days of COVID, we were able to ensure that we had implemented better ways of managing, resilience in the supply chain for rats, and we were able to procure all the rats for New South Wales government and support education in bringing children back to school. So that's our story. We've still got long ways to go in relation to our maturity, but those of you that live in New South Wales would have a great appreciation for the work that not only HealthShare has done, but the New South Wales health system's done to keep everyone safe during COVID. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Alex. It was definitely interesting times. Oops. Glenn, over to you, mate.
Good morning, everyone. It was great to hear from the other people on the webinar about the different types of events and how everyone has handled it a little bit differently. I'm going to just speak from a finance side, and a lot of what I do is dealing with private equity firms and VCs and banks and different financial regulators. And I thought I'd just give a little bit of an overview of really from a private equity side and from a cash side and from a finance side of really, a post-pandemic world after COVID or still during COVID, even today. I think the two takeaways that I have seen, and I think it's a good thing for our industry, is that our supply chain or logistics has gone from a second thought or a must-have to being front and center in boardroom discussions. I think that has really elevated the discussion around supply chain and supply chain resilience, how we look at data and analytics, how we use it, what type of processes, from everything from what type of tools we use, and then of course how we contract, be it through ocean, air, warehouse, land, and then coming through to how we communicate that to the different stakeholders. So I think from my perspective, dealing with a lot of private equity firms who have got a lot of different portfolio companies across a lot of different sectors, in a lot of different geographies, I think that the two biggest starting points that we had was there was confusion. There was a lot of confusion and a lot of discrepancies in the information that was flowing. And sitting in the US, obviously we wake up in the morning and we get what happened in Asia the night before, and so we were always dealing with a lot of confusion, and then you're getting the disruption, and that's disruption to all facets of the supply chain market. And so as we move forward, I think, and again, as Peter said about the Ligentia program and different other tools, I think data and analytics, and being able to understand what does your own data stand for, how to look at it, how to read it, how to view it, and then how to put it into a context of good supply chain management, and whatever that that supply chain management will look like for your own organization and your own finances. But I think the big thing is to really have a clear and clean look at data, and go back to 2020 and then come forward to the end of coming up to the third quarter now of 2022, so that we can really have a look at sort of and analyze the data and see what was actually the driving forces behind the bottlenecks, the confusion, the disruptions, and then really put a really good solid program and look forward to how next year, especially in 2023, is going to roll out. I mean, I'm not sure if everyone caught what happened in the US markets today, but you know, the Dow went down by 1,200 points and the inflation marker was off. And what we have here in the US is we have an enormous amount of overstocked inventories. One of the private equity firms that I deal with is the largest owner of chassis in the whole US market. And they have never seen so many containers sitting on chassis for more than 45 to 60 days at a time. And they are making more money from chassis fees on a daily basis than they've ever done before. So again, there's different sort of parameters that are happening. I think that data integrity and accuracy is one that's also come to light. I think by using proper BI tools, KPI reporting, consolidated dashboard, and then taking that into cost analysis tools, I think is very important when looking at every element of the supply chain. Again, coming back just to the US market here, there's a very, very big problem with overstocked inventories in warehouses. And it's going to create a problem in Q4 and even leading into Q1 as the numbers from some of these really big retailers and other big companies come out, because what they're sitting on the balance sheet or what they've costed on the balance sheet from their inventory may not be relevant in 2023. They've obviously bought product with higher cost of material costs, higher freight forwarding costs or logistics costs, and obviously then you've got elevated manpower costs at the moment just to facilitate those warehouses. And then as we come into 2023 and the supply chain costs have eased, we're seeing also a reduction in the supply chain and also in the raw material costs, which means that the product that you bought in 2021 or 2022 is you paid an elevated price, and most people are going to be looking for a discount of that product. So again, that's going to have a very big push and pull effect, especially on people who are sitting on a lot of inventory, and then the effect on the cash flow and the cash roll. I think staffing in the right areas and dual roles is critical. We're seeing, especially in the US market, where we are overpaying, compared to 2021 and 2020, where we're paying anywhere from 35 to 45% to get operators, truck drivers, warehouse personnel. The cost of your FTEs has really increased significantly, and obviously that's was need to be looked at when we're looking at getting better efficiencies. I think looking at processes, having clarity and consistency through your process and your process controls is going to be a very key way of how you manage, the ups and downs, and really as we sort of look through also to compliance. I think the ownership issues and also stock rotations, and it's all going to be played out this year. And also into the first of 2023. Planning and being proactive, also being nimble, being able to react very quickly to the market changes. I think from the last 2 weeks, I've seen the ocean freight prices go trans-Pacific from Asia to the US. They were at 4,200 2 weeks ago, and last night they went to 2,800. So, we're seeing a very big spread, and we're seeing a very big turnaround. I think the Incoterm management and also looking at buyers consolidation, especially looking at where you warehouse, why you warehouse, and then having the tools like PO management, as Peter said, which will really then give you the planning and visibility of why and how you're ordering product and when you're moving it, and also where you're storing it. I think the ocean air transport carriers, I think next year is going to be very interesting. A lot of big contracts were made at the start of 2022, and carriers were not forcing, but were, asking people to sign 2 and 3 year contracts, where now those contracted rates are probably somewhere in the vicinity of 30 to 40% above the standard spot market price today. So in 2023, we see that there's going to be a need for a blend of let's say 50% of contract and a 50% of a spot FAK market or a spot market, and that'll go across both ocean, air and land transport. And then when you look at warehousing, especially I just talked the US market, I mean, there's only 3% of availability of warehouses in the US. So we're seeing a very big uptick of being able to look at Mexico, especially, you know, we're calling that our China +1 strategy, where we're really moving a lot of product either through or having it manufactured in Mexico to sort of beat the reliance on the Asian market for the US. Flexibility is going to be the aim and going to be the must on any partner or any supplier relationship that you have. And then coming down to the communication, which is also, you know, it's just such a key to getting some clarity on where the business sits. You know, the freight forwarding, traditional freight forwarding and logistics and supply chain business has always been transactional based, and that's just not going to work anymore. We need to have collaborative solutions and really work together about what works best for both parts of the business. And then again, coming to clear and accurate reporting and visibility tools to drive and to manage all of those decisions. And again, working with all the stakeholders to really balance the inventory needs versus the whatever the market conditions may be, and then obviously the push and pull of how the global markets will keep rolling through.
Awesome, thanks, Glenn.
Marvellous. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to our panelists for that really informative content. We're going to move now into a Q&A discussion. I would invite you to put any questions you might have into the Q&A function in Zoom. But what we're going to do in the meantime is we're just going to put a quick poll live. I know that one of the topics that certainly Peter and I have been discussing is how should the industry manage its inventory just in case or just in time, and Glenn touched very heavily on that. If you are able, please give us your thoughts and vote into that poll, and we will share the results in just a couple of minutes time. But to get things started, I have a couple of questions here prepared, and I'd like to go to Sharon first. Sharon, I thought that your model, the 3-stage model on resilience planning, you know, before, during and after the event, and attaching scenarios to that was just super simple and super insightful. But when you face the market and deal with the various stakeholders that you come across in the day-to-day, because I know that you're very widely networked, how do you see the landscape in terms of people actually being in that space and able to do that level of resilience planning? Where are people at with it?
Well, everyone's in a different situation, and basically the firms that have learnt from past significant supply chain disruptions are much better prepared. For example, the organisations that learned from the 2008 global financial crisis, they are much better prepared because they know that they're relying on their financial reserves to help them to ride the wave of disruption. And they know that what got them through is their ability to be flexible and adaptable so that they could respond as required to cope during that disruption. But they were, you know, relying on relationships. And what we're seeing now is the massive push to technology. And any technology that can help you reduce costs, improve efficiency, improve visibility, that's absolutely key.
Absolutely, Sharon. Just spinning off of that actually and moving to Alex, I noticed in your presentation, and actually all of our speakers have touched on this, is the importance of technology and that insights and planning piece to enrich the capability of supply chain professionals. Alex, I was curious to understand, I saw that you in your slides you'd featured Tableau as the analytics platform that you'd moved to. I was just curious to understand how you found that actually. Was it already in place in the organisation, or did you have to stand it up on the hoof literally as the crisis was unfolding, and what were your learnings from that?
Yep. So we had to stand it up as we were, you know, trying to manage the crisis. Luckily for us, what we did is we made sure that we had the right level of support around us to make sure that we had a seamless implementation. It did provide us some really good insights early on, and we're able to do a lot more efficiently track and tracing of what was going on and the movement of stock within not only our own organisation but across government as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then coming to Glenn, really interested, and it's something that Sharon and I had a conversation about a week or so ago. The idea of supply chain becoming a truly strategic function within organisations. What do companies need to do to sort of you know, accelerate and embrace that kind of positioning for supply chain, and how will they feel the impacts and the benefits of making that leap?
Well, I think one of the really, again, I touched on it, and one thing that I think COVID has really shown to us is supply chain and logistics is really a core competency of a business. I think that the amount of private equity firms that I work with and the due diligence side that we do, it's now not just a department that is sort of leads up to someone else. This is all being taken at boardroom level. Most CFOs have a heavy hand now in logistics and supply chain, given we went from we had on the ocean side, we had a 10x on spend, and on an air freight side, we had about a 12x on spend. Domestic transport went up by about 18x in the US. And so when you have these types of increased cost and then complexity, I think that the boardroom has really now taken a big hard look, and that's where now it's really become a driver, and also to force companies to really look at what is their technology platform, what is their PO management, how are they controlling their inventory, what does it mean for their cash flow, what does it mean on their balance sheet, and that's a really key important factor, and I don't believe that that's going away anytime soon. I think a lot of the companies in the US here are really now really a lot of them have got themselves into a bit of a mess with inventory, and it's going to be interesting on, as I said, how that plays out, especially in the markets in Q4 and Q1, especially as companies start to really, they've given some guidance, especially in their financials of where they sit, but I don't think really this has come out, and I don't think that some of the true costs have come out either. Yeah,
absolutely agree there. We've got some interesting questions coming in from our delegates. So this is a killer one, and I've heard this so many times over the last few months, and I feel slightly unfair asking it to our panelists, but I will anyway, because I think it's the most controversial question on everybody's lips. So having gone through COVID and it having highlighted that supply chains before 2020 were more operational than strategic. In terms of you guys and the intelligence that you're gathering, how many years do you think it might take before we return to any sense of normality? And I'll throw that open to whoever would like to wade in first.
Look, I'll jump in. It's one of my favourite topics. Look, I think the best answer to this question I've heard is from a conference a while ago, who said normal was 1995 to 2005. And I think we're about a few years away from that. There's another question here about Chinese New Year and the complexities around that. I think that we've got a number of events coming up that are going to show that the complexity is still there. Sharon can talk about the bullwhip effect in the supply chain probably until the cows come home. But if you've got, containers sitting on chassis in the US for 45 days, we've got problems. I can remember when Hanjin went bankrupt 5 years ago, whatever it was, that took nearly 12 months to sort out. We're on a scale 1,000 times bigger than that for supply chain disruption. I think you've got issues with inflation we've never dealt with. You've got issues in China, people doing multiple sourcing. I think the challenges are there, but I think it's also, you know, with challenge comes opportunity. And I think this is where we need to take that chance. And I think the good companies are going to do very well out of this because they're going to react. I don't think we're going back to, you know, pre-COVID times anytime soon. And that's assuming we don't have another pandemic or some other major disruption.
I hear you. Anybody else like to weigh in on that one?
I was just going to echo what Peter said, and I think, you know, just from a financial side, I think that the ocean carriers and a lot of people have worked out how to make money.
Yep.
And, you know, if you've got shareholders and you know, I mean, if you look at all of the ocean carriers, and I'm talking the main ones, you know, most of their financials, if you look at a bottom line EBIT, they're up nearly 2,000% from pre-COVID levels. Now, if you...
Yeah. So just let me jump in, Glenn. Maersk is a 112-year-old company, have made more money in the last 2 years than their history.
Yeah, and so this is also too, the ocean carriers have also equipped themselves with some very, very smart analysts who analyze every piece of data now. I mean, and that really never used to happen. So, you know, we're already seeing blank sailings. We're seeing, you know, ships being parked due to the rates starting to drop off. But, you know, the carriers have worked out how to make money and they're not going to give that up anytime soon, as far as I'm concerned.
For sure. And then we've got a further question from Vladimir, which brings it right up to the here and now. The upcoming Chinese New Year period and the lead up to it is likely to take place under a more unique combination of circumstances compared to any previous year. How does the panel see this period and its aftermath actually turning out? Right down into the muck and bullets there. Anybody got a perspective that they'd like to share on that one?
I'll jump in. Vlad, it's going to turn to shit, putting it as simply as I possibly can. You know, again, echoing what Glenn said, the shipping lines are going to take this an opportunity to cause challenges. You know, we've already seen, I think the forerunner we're seeing with the national holiday in October, I think they were talking about up to 15% blank sailings in that week. Again, I think in the past, where we've had these 1 week events in China, they were 1 week events that were under control. We're now going to have a 1 week event where we're out of control. So, you know, we don't have the passenger aircraft. You know, the shipping lines they know how to make money now. So they're going to use this as an opportunity to put pressure on the supply chain again. You know, I think but the knock-on effect, I mean, we have this, Sharon, I think we have the same issue with warehouse capability in Australia at the moment. It's impossible to get warehouse space. You know, I think all these things just knock on. I think it's just another challenge on top of the challenges we already have, and it's just going to amplify those issues. But I think it also goes back to the solution. You know, this is where not all POs are created equal. You know, you need to, you know, where we used to do quarterly forecasting and things like that with customers, it's now almost weekly. You know, you've really got to get down and say, okay, these are the POs I've got. These are the ones I need to get out today. And if I can't get them out, what are my alternatives? And Glenn had a comment in there before about Incoterm management. You know, we've got quite comfortable with, you know, FOB Incoterms. But one of the things that, you know, Glenn did when we were working together was we moved a lot of product to ex-works so that we could control where it shipped out of. So, you know, if there were problems out of Ningbo, we could ship it out of Shanghai, etc. So I think this is where you've got to start getting a little bit innovative with the way you address some of this stuff.
Absolutely. And we've got a further question, which again is a little bit more tactical, but equally interesting. And you know, given all of these challenges and the desire to improve resilience, should our participants, or where could they focus more to garner benefits in resilience? Should they be looking upstream or downstream in their supply chains? Sharon, I wonder if you've got a perspective on that.
Yes, well, obviously both upstream and downstream are highly important. And basically we need to understand what is the demand. We need greater visibility of demand then we can go to our suppliers and see if we're able to, how we're going to fulfill that demand. And is that demand constant, or is it short term, or is it long term? And what is our +1 strategy, like Glenn was also alluding to, because we do need to consider dual sourcing arrangements where required and move away from single sourcing. But at the same time, we need to look at criticality. So the criticality, the value and the risk of particular inventory items, and manage that criticality. And that also shows your supply chain, that critical path that was also mentioned, because you've got your critical customers, critical suppliers, managing that critical inventory and managing that entire end-to-end process is very important. Sorry, I'm not weighing up on which one is more important. They're equally important.
Indeed, and I'm guessing it's very much circumstance specific. Perfect. We are actually, we've got a huge amount of questions coming through. And what I'm going to do for everybody is I'm going to do a capture of these questions, and we will formulate some responses to the ones that we haven't been able to scoop up in the discussion after the session, and circulate them out to everybody who's attended. Rachel, are you able to share back the results of the first poll for us? And perhaps that can, Peter, I don't know if you would like to just make up, just give us some kind of closing remarks. I'm conscious that we're right up to time.
Yeah, look, I'm intrigued at this just in case, because unfortunately I think that's true, which is a bit disappointing, and I think it's going to cause us challenges, as I think globally we're running out of warehouse space, and just in case means more challenges. Look, I think it's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you all. You know, Alex and Glenn, I've had the pleasure of working with on some of these challenges in the past, and it's always interesting to get, you know, their views. I know that Alex makes what we did, you know, what his team did in COVID sound quite easy, but I can assure you it was anything but. Organised chaos would be the best way to describe it. You know, their team was working 20 hours a day, and you know, it was madness, but they got up. And I think, to me, the key out of all this is we need to learn from what we've been through. I think that as an industry, we got very complacent. You know, things just worked, and it wasn't. We didn't have to earn our keep. You know, as Glenn said, we were reporting into the CFO or something like that. We weren't strategic. But I think in the post-pandemic world, we need to keep being seen to be innovators and driving change and looking to do things different, and looking at those +1 scenarios and preparing for the future. And I think there was a couple of questions there around collaboration. You know, I think that's something else we need to do a lot more in, and even in simple things like, you know, I'm going to buy Alex a beer and help him with his cycling training program, but you know, they're one of the biggest employers in New South Wales, or one of the biggest employers in Australia. You know, what's their strategy to get people? Because our industry is struggling to get people. So I think it's even things like that we need to do more of, to learn from each other about how to do things different going forward.
Absolutely brilliant, Peter. Thank you for that. So, as I say, everybody who's attended this morning will get a follow-up email with a copy of the report that supports that from where our content was generated from this morning, the Ligentia content. So that will be with you shortly. There will also be a recording of this morning's webinar if you'd like to dip back in. I'd just like to say another huge thank you to our panelists for their insight and opinions and points of view. And again, thank you for the questions that have come in. We have timed out on that, so we won't be able to pick them up in the session, but what we will do is Peter and I will capture those together, and we will post some replies and responses, and we'll share that back with our panelists for their expert points of view, and we'll circulate that. It might take us a few days to get to that, but a huge thank you, and have a brilliant rest of the afternoon and evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.